All right, so note sheet. Constructors, the entire purpose of the constructor is to set values for some of the, okay, I didn't give you enough room, I'll be honest. Some of the instance variables. I am so sorry. Can I tell you why there's not much room there? We used to use the word fields instead of instance variables. We used to use the word fields. So if you ever see the word fields, it's the same thing as instance variables. It just means variables that all of your objects are going to have. Like, all rectangles are going to have a length and width. All students are going to have a name and a GPA and a grade or something like that. So the entire purpose of the constructor is to set values for some of the instance variables of an object at the time of its creation. Just like when you were made, fresh out of the oven with your DNA, a lot of decisions were already made about you. Your hair color, your eye color, your height and weight. We can do the same with constructors. What's another name for creation of an object? Does anybody remember? It starts with an I is what I'm looking for. Oh, yeah, whoever said instantiation, very good. Initialization is very close. Instantiation is like I just started spelling it again in the middle of it. Instantiation. Initialization is like instantiating just regular old variables. Instantiation is creating objects. The constructor is a method. It's a very special method, but technically it is a method. It's just a very, very special one. Just like you're all very, very special people, the constructor is a very, very special method. Some rules. I think we wrote some of these down. Public is always specified. Your constructor is always going to start with the keyword public. Whether it's public rectangle, public square, public person, public student, public triangle, public ball, it's always going to start with public. Next, the name of the constructor is always the same as the name of the class. And then lastly, it's actually a void method, which means it returns nothing, but we don't write the word void. Like yesterday we had, what were some of the void methods we had for our ball class? Anybody remember? Bounce. Display. Move. Those were all void methods. A constructor is also void, but we just omit. Void is omitted. So as a template, the beginning of your constructor is always going to look like this. Public followed by class name. And since you're all wonderful students and know to capitalize the name of your class, of course your constructor will always have a capital letter as well. And then typically there's some parentheses. We'll talk about what goes in those parentheses momentarily. So there are two different types of constructors that you looked at in the reading and we wrote down up here. They are the default constructor and the specified constructor. Let's start with this specified, or sometimes you'll hear it called a parameterized constructor. This special constructor, the specified constructor, has parameters. Another word for parameters, you can think of it as like inputs for some, if not all, of the instance variables. Yeah, I know I didn't leave you enough room there. Scrunch it. So the specified constructor has parameters or inputs for some, if not all, of the instance variables, because the idea is you get to choose values for the instance variables at the time of creation. It allows the setting of instance variable values at creation, instead of having to go back and use methods to change the fields, aka instance variables. If you don't have one of these special parameterized constructors, you're going to have to go back and change all the stuff. I kind of think of a parameterized constructor as like, do you guys ever play like a, how do I explain this? Have you ever played one of those video games where you can create your own character? Have you ever played one of those? Like if it's FIFA, you get to choose how fast they are, how big they are, how whatever. Yeah, or whatever. Sure. So it's kind of like, I kind of think of a parameterized constructor as like a character creation tool. What just happened? Let's try this again. Character creation. or a character creator. Because when you're playing one of those video games, you get to choose your name, your height, your speed, your skill, your handles, your whatever it is. You get to choose that stuff. So it's kind of like the same thing with a parameterized constructor. It's like a character creator. You get to choose the values at the time that you create your character. Here's an example of a circle class that might have a specified constructor. You can see it's public. It's got the name of the class, circle. And then really there's only one thing that describes a circle, a radius. And so you'll see that I take in a single parameter to represent the radius. And what's going to happen is essentially is when I create a new circle, whatever value I specify will get stored inside of the radius instance variable. I thought we could write another one. Since there's only one here, I thought we could write one together. Let's do one for like a rectangle. Constructors are always public. If I'm writing it for a class rectangle, what's going to be the name of the constructor? Rectangle, exactly right. It's always got to be the same as the name of the class. I don't write void in here where I typically would because we just don't put the keyword void for constructors. And let's say a length and a width represents a rectangle. I need to take in values that's going to represent the length and the width. I'm going to say the length and the width are doubles. So I need to take in some inputs that's going to represent the values of the length and width. So I'll say double maybe L and double W. And if you're wondering why don't I just say length and width here, well, the instance variables are going to be named length and width. So I can't just say length equals length or width equals width. I need a different name. And since these are like temporary variables here, these inputs, I just kind of use a single word, a single letter to represent what they're going to represent. And then inside my constructor, I can just say something like length equals L and width equals W. And essentially what that'll allow me to do is to choose values for the length and width of my rectangle at the time that I create it. Ooh, sounded exciting, whatever that was. I want to be part of that. Oh, nice. Okay, so that's one type of constructor. So how would you use that constructor? Well, in the example for the circle class over here, you could say something like circle C equals new circle. And then you could just send in a value like 3.0. That would create a new circle with a radius of 3.0. If you really want to know what's happening, when I say new circle, Java knows to go and find my constructor for the circle class. It finds the constructor for the circle class. And it goes, okay, 3.0 is going to be used as this little placeholder here. Essentially, R is going to be storing 3.0 at this point. Then inside of the constructor I say radius equals whatever the value for R is. Well, radius is going to be 3.0 in this case. So that'll create a new circle object somewhere in Java's memory that has whatever radius I specify if I write that line of code. And if I do circle C2 equals new circle 5.0, it'll make another circle in Java's memory that now has a radius of 5.0. Yesterday, when we wrote our ball class, how many constructors did we write? I'm trying to remember. Did we just write one? We wrote 3? I know we wrote 3 methods. We wrote 3 methods, like we wrote bounce, display. So that's right, we did write 3 methods, bounce, display, and move. But then I think we only wrote 1 constructor, like public ball, something like that, right? Okay, and then we made everything random or something. Speaking of a constructor where you don't have to choose starting values is a default constructor. I'm so glad you asked. We have it written up there. Let me choose green for this one here. Default constructors, or sometimes referred to as parameter lists. Why? They don't have any parameters. Default constructors are special types of constructors that are used to create a new object with, I think Kaylin, you said default values, right? Exactly right. Instead of applying specific values. A default constructor not only typically, but always has 0 parameters passed to it. So, like for our circle one, this has 1 parameter. For the rectangle one, this has 2 parameters. The default constructor is going to have nothing in the parentheses. So it has nothing passed to it and creates an object based on values preset by the programmer. You get to do the choosing. I kind of think of a default constructor as, have you ever made like a new social media account and it just gives you some default picture and then you have to go back in and change where you're from and change your tagline and change your picture and all that stuff? I think on Twitter it used to give you like the egg picture right when you created a Twitter account. That's kind of like the default constructor. Yes, you've just made an account. The programmer chose some preset values, and they're hoping that you, the user, come back and change some of them. So it has 0 parameters. You don't get to choose the values at the time of creation. Hopefully, the user comes back and changes them. So, for example, if you have a book class, specified constructor and default constructor may look like this. On the left side, I've got a default constructor where you can choose the title, author, and number of pages because there's parameters for the title, author, and number of pages. For a default constructor, it's like a placeholder. I don't know if you've ever seen like your favorite author has a new book coming out and Amazon just puts up a placeholder page. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? They say it's going to be released in December. Okay. Who has a book coming out? Maybe this person's been in the news lately. I think John Bolton has a book coming out at some point. But they haven't... Oh my gosh. It's going to be released so soon? How has he written it already? Has this guy even been working? Okay, I don't want to get political. Let's see. Let's go back here. Let's try somebody else. Does like J.K. Rowling have a book coming? Oh, wait. Neil Stephenson maybe has a book coming out. Dr. J has a book coming out. So usually they have like these placeholders, like for a book that's coming out, but they don't know how long it's going to be. They don't really know the title. They just say like working title or something like that. And that's kind of what a default constructor is. It's just like a placeholder till you come back and change some of the values. So for example, if you know a book's coming out, they want to put up a placeholder page, they might say the title is default, the author is default, number of pages is 0, and they're going to come back and change that a little bit later on. Now, how does Java know which one to pick? That's a great question. Using these examples of book here, let's go ahead and make 2 different book objects. If I go ahead and, let me do different colors here. If I were to say something like book B1, anybody reading a really good book right now? What is it? Water for Elephants. Thank you. Let's make that book. Okay, water. Let's do Amazon Water for Elephants. So, oh, not the movie. Is this with Robert Pattinson? Get out of here. Okay, Water for Elephants. Sarah Gruen. Is this the right one? Wow, that is a good book, Grace. Look at that. 8,667 ratings, 4.5-star review. Look, you can buy it used for a dime. Is it worth a dime? Yes, I'm going to go with yes. Unknown Binding scares me. Okay, Water for Elephants, a novel, I'm guessing is like not really the title. Okay. So I would say book B1 equals new book. And since I know all of the title and the author and all that stuff, I'm going to put in the title is Water for Elephants. How do I know that I do the title first? Well, this constructor says TTL, I'm guessing that's short for title. Water for Elefantes. That's a string, so I put it in quotes, comma. Then I need the author next. Grace, do you remember what the author is, or should I switch tabs? Sarah with an H or no? I don't remember either. She doesn't get it. Switch tabs, are you for real? No H. No H, weird last name. Okay, Sarah Gruen. I know the author goes second because that's what the constructor says. And number of pages. I'm guessing you don't know that off the top of your head. 394, is that true? You guys are just saying random numbers. It'll hit. 368, not bad actually. 368 pages. And okay, so that's going to create one book object, and let's say, you know, you want to create another book object, but you're not sure, you know, who's going to write. You just know you need to allocate space and memory. Maybe you just say something like this: book B2 equals new book. You just do that. So I've got two different constructors. I've made two different objects. How does Java know which constructor to call based on the code I've written there? Well, one of the constructors has three parameters: a string, and an int. Do you see one of those two constructors that requires a string, and an int? Yes. So Java's going to know when I pass in a string, and an int to call this constructor. For the second one, I had no parameters. If I don't pass in anything, Java's going to know to go find the one that has no parameters, which is this one. So Java, even though there's two constructors with the same exact name, public book, Java can figure out which one you're talking about, which one you want to use to make your object, based on how many parameters you send and what their types are. If you say string, int, Java will go find the constructor that requires string, int. If you do no parameters, like the parentheses over here next to book are empty, Java will go find the constructor that has no parameters. So Java figures it out. To answer the question, how does Java know which one to pick? To answer that, Java knows which one to pick based on the number and order of parameters. Java knows which one to pick based on the order and type of parameters. The stuff in the parentheses, the inputs, if you want to call it that. Because it can be confusing. You got two methods, both named public book. Both constructors are named public book. How does Java know which one to pick? Well, since you sent string, int, Java's going to go find the one that requires a string, int. If I were a dingus and I sent in water for elephants, 368 Sarah Gruen, my code's not going to compile because that order would be string, int, string. I don't have a constructor that's looking for string, int, string. So my code would not compile. Java knows which one of those two constructors to pick based on the parameters that I send in. The next thing is actually doing it. Should we maybe take a 2-minute break to absorb the information and then do it? Okay, let's take a quick 2-minute here. It's about 9:48. Let's get back in here, 9:50, and we'll do it. What was my hotkeys? Good stuff. Okay, I think I can close the Water for Elephants tab. I am back over on CS Awesome because I thought there's a couple good questions in here. Starting at the check your understanding line, it says click on all the lines of code that are part of constructors in the following class. I can tell something's a constructor if it's public and has no return type and is the same as the name of the class. Since this class is named name, these are instance variables, so no. I'm guessing this is part of the constructor, and this, and this, and this. These other two methods are kind of like the methods we wrote yesterday, like bounce and display and move. They have void, and I know a constructor can't have void, so I think I got that one. Oh, feels good to be the king. Okay. Questions there? Why those are the constructors? All right, moving along. It says, what best describes the purpose of a class's constructor? What are we thinking? A, determines the amount of space needed for an object and creates the object. I don't see where we've determined the space needed. Names the new object? No, the constructor doesn't do that. When we actually make the object, we do that when we instantiate it. So I don't think B is right. C, return to free storage all the memory used by the instance of the class. That just sounds like complicated words for the person that didn't do their homework and trying to trick them because they choose the most complicated answer. It's also wrong. I'm guessing it's D, initialize the instance variables of the object. Because that's what a constructor does. Cool. Okay. Let's see here. It says the following class fraction. Class defines a fraction with the instance variables numerator and denominator. If you don't know what those are, numerator is the one on top. And then you got a denominator on the bottom. Thought I'd remind everybody of that just in case. Okay. It uses two constructors. Note that the constructor sets the default instance variable values to 1 rather than 0. So we don't end up with the divide by 0. Oh, that would be so bad. That actually is an error in Java as well. Just like in math. Try to guess what it will print before you run it. Hint, remember to start with the main method. All right. So don't run it. Avoid. Don't touch it. I'll give you guys a minute to look at the code there and try to guess what it's going to print out. Boink. All right. Moving along. This car one. Should we do it? Let's do it. All right. I'll make my font a little bit bigger so we can see here. It says the following class defines a car with the instance variables model and year. For example, a Honda 2010 car. Whoa. So living a life of luxury. All right. However, some of the code is missing. Fill in the code for two constructor. By the way, I drive a 2010 Corolla, so I'm really not hating on these people. For example, a Honda 2010 car. However, some of the code is missing. I'm not flexing on you with my 2010 Corolla either, don't worry. Fill in the code for the two constructors that are numbered 1 and 2, and fill in the code to call the constructors in the main method numbered 3. Okay, so let's see here. Number 1, this looks like a default constructor. How do I know? Because it looks like the parentheses are empty. Number 1 says set the instance variables to default values of quotation marks, empty quotes, in 2019. So I'm going to say model equals that. I'm guessing model is the one they want empty quotes because the other one's an int. I don't think I could make an int equal to empty quotes. And it says make the year 2019. Oh, living in the past. Bless you. There we go. Some other options for default constructors. It's really contextually based. You know, here you could make the model default or something, or unknown. The year you could make 0 as well. It's really based on the context of the situation you're in. Now I can tell that here is a regular old parameterized constructor. How do I know? Because it's got parameters for both the model and the year. By the way, these parameters can be named whatever the heck you want, except two things. Do not name them the exact same as the instance variable. So if the instance variable is named model, don't name this model. If the instance variable is named year, don't name this year. That's number 1. Number 2, you should be able to tell which parameter corresponds to which instance variable. So obviously a parameter named init model corresponds to model, and a parameter named init year corresponds to year. I think in this case you could have also said something like string m if you wanted to, and int y would have been fine as well. Okay, so anyway, set the instance variables to the init parameters. So I would say something like model equals init model, and year equals init year. And I know these active code windows don't quite properly indent everything. We're writing code in a web browser. Let's just, it'll be okay. Print car info, looks like it's all done. Good stuff. What else am I supposed to do? Oh, and then fill in the code to call the constructors in the main method, number 3. So now in the main method, I actually have to make these. Create 2 car objects using the 2 constructors. Car 1 will be default values, so I'll just say new car. How does it know I'm calling the parameterless constructor? Because there's no parameters there. Then it knows I'm calling the default constructor the parameterless constructor. It says the second car, a Honda 2010. Heck, if you don't want to create a Honda 2010, it's your world. I'm just living in it. So if you don't want to make a Honda 2010, you could do something like, Jaguar XKE Roadster 1967 if you want to. Don't tell the CS Awesome people that we didn't follow their directions. You can make whatever car you want to. Celine's funny. So I think the students usually have nicer cars than the teachers. It's okay. It's okay. I'm not trying to get into some political thing about teacher wages. No, I get several peanuts every week, and even more when I do a good job. They give me mini shuck. All right. Only when I do a good job, though. Otherwise, beating. Okay, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. So, we got 2 cars that get printed out when that's all done. Car 1, default model, nothing. Car year 2019. I've also got my second car, car 2, created with the parameterized constructor Jaguar XKE Roadster 1967. And you could change this to whatever you want. You can make another car if you wanted to. What's the rule again? 1 class, many objects. 1 car class, as many cars as you want to. You can fill up a whole parking garage if you want. Questions on that car activity? How are we doing? What's the temperature of the room? We doing all right? Medium rare? It's like if you press that fleshy part of your hand, there we go. You got to put down, what, 2 fingers for medium rare? Yeah, that's where we're at, right there. Right there. Okay. A little pink in the middle. You're eating, you might as well eat a tire. All right. Okay. It says constructors are used to set the initial state of an object by initializing its instance variables. The examples above have instance variables that are primitive types. For example, strings, ints, doubles as their instance variables. But you could have other objects as instance variables as well. For example, a person could have an address object as an instance variable. Yeah, this is getting too complicated. I'm going to skip it. That sounds good to me. What I would like to do to you, though, or do with you, I don't want to do anything to you other than make you learn. Wait, dodged a bullet there. On the back of your note sheet, there is this sheet. On the back of your notes, there's a sheet that looks like this. I thought maybe we could do this together here. It says, using the partial class provided below, complete the exercises. So we got a class student. A student has a name. You guys have names, correct? A student has a grade that's an int. I'm guessing that's 9, 10, 11, 12. A student has a GPA that's a double, hopefully ranging, between 1.0 and 4 point whatever, depending on your AP situation. Remainder of the class not shown. Number 1 says, create a default constructor, 0 parameters. Okay, default constructor. Constructors are public or private? Public. Now next I would typically put the return type. What do I put for the constructor's return type? Nothing. What's the name of my constructor? Student, the same as the name of the class. So student. And it says a 0 parameter constructor, so what goes in the parentheses? Nada. Nothing. Do your best left curly brace you can imagine. And it says initialize the name to empty quotes. Okay. This is a default constructor. You, the programmer, get to choose these default values. So name to nothing, grade to 0, and then GPA to 0.0. Again, the whole point of that constructor is we're not going to have a student with no name, grade 0, and GPA of 0.0. But let's say you just have to throw them in the system really quick. and you're not sure what it's a new student entering the district, but you don't have their name or their grade or their GPA yet. You create one of these default constructors, so then hopefully you can come back in and modify the values for that. Questions on that one? Dose. Create a one parameter constructor that will initialize name to the parameter value, grade to 0. Okay. So it seems like we're going to have one parameter that represents the name. So let's again start public student. And in this case, we're supposed to have one parameter that represents the name. So when I make a parameter, I have to first state its type. I have to declare it essentially. What is the type of name? String. So my parameter has to be string. And I said before, do not name your parameters the exact same thing as the instance variable, but name it something that's representative. So instead of naming it name, what could I name this instance or this parameter? I could name it n, I could name it the name, I could name it nm or something like that. I usually just do single letters. So this would allow you to create a student with a name, but then hopefully later on you're going to set the grade, set the GPA to something different. So we know their name, it's whatever the variable n contains, and then it says set grade to 0 and GPA to 0.0. Grade to 0, GPA to 0.0. Man, we are in constructor mode here. Put on your hard hats. You guys want to try to do 3 and 4 on your own? Let's take off the training wheels. Let's live a little. Try to do 3 and 4 on your own. I'll give you guys, let's say till 10:10ish. What time does Sean Connery go to Wimbledon? 10ish. All right. Looking pretty good out there. Let's see. Yeah, this is supposed to have a semicolon here. Thank you. Thank you. This one, I forgot my semicolon. Very embarrassing moment. Don't tell my superiors. All right, student. This is supposed to have a string n for the name, as well as a grade, I believe, is an int, though. Right? Isn't grade an int? Grade is an int, so I need to say int g for the second parameter in this one. So I'll say something like name equals n, grade equals g, and you got, it says set the GPA to 0.0. Now this one makes sense. Let's say you've just matriculated from the middle school to the high school level. Well, you got a name, you got a grade. Your 9th grade, you got your name there, but maybe you don't have a GPA yet at the high school level. So maybe this is the constructor you call when you matriculate from the middle school to the high school. And then lastly, this is like full on, you've got a student transferring in the middle of their high school career here, so you know what their name, grade, and GPA already is. So you take in all of those in G, double. What'd you guys make the parameter for GPA named? GP? Okay. Sounds good to me. And I'd say name equals, name equals N, grade equals G, Judas, and GPA equals GP in that case. And then lastly, it says, in the main method below, create 4 student objects using each of the constructors once. Remember, each object must have a different name. All right. I'm going to need your spirit energy here. Let's see. Student, let's do student, I'm just going to call it S1, the name of the object S1. You could name it Bob or Billy or whatever the heck you want to. I'm naming this student S1. I say new student. I want to create this one with the constructor from number 1. How many parameters? 0. It's the default constructor. So I just do that. That one's created with the constructor from number 1. Next one, if I want to create a student using this constructor, it's just asking for the name. So I'll say something like student. Remember, the objects have to have different names, so maybe S2. You could name it other student. You can name it whatever the heck you want to. What did you guys name your student? Carter. Like Sean Carter. Or Carter Hoffman. Either way. Let's see here. The third one is looking for a string for the name and an int for the grade. So I need to send both those things in. Again, how do I know what it's looking for? I just look at these parameters up here and up here. In this case, it's looking for a string that represents the name and an int that represents the grade. So again, I'll say new student. When I say new, it knows to go find the constructor and use that to make the object. This one needs a name and a grade. So maybe, I don't know, Timmy, and he's in, 11th grade. Good job, Timmy. And then lastly, it says make a student using this last constructor over here that has the name, grade, and GPA. I don't know, maybe you make yourself. New student. It requires the name first as a string, so you know I'm going to put that in quotes, eCalb. You can put your own self in there. Grade, I don't know what grade I'm at anymore. 29th grade, maybe? I have no idea. I'm just going to put myself in 5th grade here. And then GPA, 1.0. So, today, as a review, we learned about constructors. What do constructors do? They allow you to set values for some, if not all, of the instance variables at the time of creation. We learned how to write different constructors. We learned about parameterized constructors, where you get to choose some of the values for variables at the time of creation. We learned about parameterless constructors, or default constructors, where the computer programmer gets to decide default values. There is a short assignment that's coming around right now. The assignment looks like this. On the front side of the assignment, you are supposed to take a toy class and write constructors and make objects and stuff like that. The instructions are all right there. I guess it's just making constructors. On the back, there is a song class that has some issues. You are supposed to find the issues, find the errors, and fix them in the instructions there. This is your assignment. I will be checking that it's done tomorrow for credit, so make sure you finish it. Nice job today. Make sure you finish this assignment. I will see you tomorrow.